Konrad, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, good. I'm doing good. Thanks, Jack. Thanks for inviting me.
No problem at all. Konrad, for people who don't know who you are, could you give us a bit of an intro, please?
Yeah, for sure. I'm the business co-founder of Peanut Protocol. We make sending tokens or transferring value as easy as texting. Just send a link and you can transfer whatever you like.
That's cool. Konrad, could you take us back to way before you got into Web3? Take us back to the start of your career and talk us through the journey that's brought you here now.
It's perhaps a slightly unusual one. I For the first time I heard the term smart contract was in a philosophy department in about 2013 or 14, and we had a reading group called Smart Contracts, and it was full of postdocs and very smart people, and then me, one lone undergrad who was curious about it from like a crypto anarchist perspective. And they all talked about the future of law and jurisprudence and um, automatic execution of legal contracts. This was around the time the Ethereum white paper came out, I think 2014. And yeah, these philosophers who were all very, very theoretical were very, very excited about the future, primarily from a legal perspective. I don't think anyone back then thought about things like DeFi or meme coins. But yeah, that's how I first heard about the Ethereum ecosystem. I've heard about cryptocurrencies before, but yeah, that was a perhaps slightly unusual intro to the space.
For sure. And then you started off your career in academia, right?
Correct. So, well, I thought for my entire life that I would become an academic. And yeah, and then at some point I was writing some papers, and then suddenly I realized that there were maybe two or three people in the entire world who kind of cared who might have cared about what I was writing. Um, and at that point, I thought, well, it's nice to be on the cutting edge, but maybe that's not the only way to be at the cutting edge of, um, building a better future. And yeah, I then did a bunch of different things in my life, but decided to quit academia. As one would, my first step was actually to be a teacher. So for a very brief moment, I taught. It was a very fun time, but also the current educational system wasn't a place for me. And yeah, later I found startups thanks to my ex-co-founder, who's actually also in crypto now. So it feels like everyone's in crypto now. We did the like B2B SaaS completely unrelated to crypto.
Okay. And that was a business before Peanut Protocol that you were a founder of back then?
Exactly. So we built a um, like a tool that would let you host virtual events that were more like cocktail parties and would allow people to network. So obviously during Corona, this was really valuable for all sorts of institutions, from smaller companies to even universities, where like in a normal, if you have an office or a building or a department, people will meet at the water cooler. They'll have these casual conversations. They'll meet one another and make friends. And suddenly with Corona, you couldn't do that. All you had were these really tightly pre-planned Zoom calls that usually had an agenda. And that's not a way to build a community. So we tried to fix that with all sorts of like mingling and virtual cocktail party features and stuff like this. But yeah, I guess virtual events didn't take off the way that a lot of the space anticipated they would. Maybe fortunately, it's really nice to fly to places and actually meet people in person. But yeah, it's certainly not the most efficient way.
So was that a Web3 project as well?
No, this
Like
is
meeting
Web
in the
2.
Okay.
This was Web 2 purely. Yeah.
Okay. So you were doing metaverse, but Web 2 metaverse.
Yeah, yeah, kind of, yeah. It was like, so the only project that is worth mentioning that survived this whole wave of companies was GatherTown. That exists still, I think. And that was like a direct competitor to us. They let you have these calls where you can randomly mingle with in small groups, and that way it's much more casual, much more like a cocktail party.
Nice. I'll have to check it out. Haven't heard of them before. I'll have to look into it. So when
Yeah, I think it's. I think this whole idea is a bit dead, to be honest. No one seems to use these. I think Discord and just very simple tools like this are way more efficient in building communities. Yeah.
Yeah, I know a few companies who organize like the odd kind of coffee break, coffee meeting with employees
Yeah.
to try and build that sense of like team building and that kind of thing. Just to give people that little bit more social interaction that isn't work related. But again, I'm not sure. I don't think I've never asked, to be honest, if they use particular platforms to do that, whether or not they just schedule it as a meeting or as a Zoom or
Yeah.
Google Meets or something like that.
Yeah, there are many approaches. They generally don't seem to work very well. I think we don't see many companies adopt these. Yeah.
So then you moved on to yeah, co-create Peanut Protocol. When you first started, I'm presuming not to this question, but a no to this question. But when you first started, did you think, you know what, I want to be a founder of a business? You know, it's your plan to someday, found different startups and everything like that. Was that your end goal when you started?
Yeah, it was. So I was on a very systematic hunt for a co-founder. I was part of Entrepreneur First, which is like a co-founder matching accelerator. Um, and yeah, I was there for 3 or 4 months, trying to find someone to work with. I was pretty sure it would be crypto, either crypto or maybe something defense related. But I think these were the only two things that I really cared about. And yeah, and then there were not too many people who were in Web3. So then I matched with Hugo using Y Combinator co-founder matching, and yeah, we started working pretty much immediately.
That's cool. That's cool. Could you do you have any tips for someone who might be listening who's going to try and find a co-founder? Because it's a really hard
Yeah,
thing to do, right?
yeah.
Because you have to be
I
really bought into the person, know you work well together, be really bought into the ideas and this kind of stuff. It's quite a difficult thing to organize.
Yeah, I get asked this a lot, and really, like, it's a really, really, really hard problem. And because it is such a hard problem, it requires a systematic approach. So you need a system, just the way you would try to hire someone. You need a really good system and iterate on that system for finding a co-founder. And I guess the biggest mistake I see is people hedging too many bets and waiting for too long. So what I see happen a lot with people who want to co-found something is they they will be talking to 3 or 4 or 5 people at the same time, and with all of them have like a Google Docs open, putting in research questions and doing kind of like a half-assed job at pretending to be like iterating on ideas or ideating. And I think that generally renders very, very poor results because you can't truly ideate unless you're deeply in one problem space. And you can't really ideate with someone whom you haven't get to know very well in terms of how they tick, how you communicate with one another, and so on. So my recommendation is just have an exclusive relationship where you try to build one thing, like have very, very clear terms. Say, I don't know, I'm going to put in 20 hours this week if you have a job. If you don't have a job and you're doing this full time, put in 50 hours. And just do it with that one person for one entire week. And then after the end of the week, see how you feel about it. If you feel drained, if you feel that it wasn't a productive week, try to analyze, like, why was that? Was it because you guys didn't click, or was it because the problem was badly defined? Can I change anything about how we ideate? And then just iterate through as many people as you can. And I literally had a CRM for my co-founder match search, and
Okay.
I talked to over 100 people
Wow.
before I decided to co-found with Hugo, and so did Hugo. Hugo also had about 50 people in his pipeline. So it's yeah, it requires a system, and you can't just. I think I have so many friends who are like co-founding and ideating for a year or two, where there are no results essentially. They are like trying something out with one person for 3 months, but there are no clear terms. Expectations are not clearly set. And then another recommendation that I always give is there are some really nice lists, and you can find one of them on my Substack, where it's just very simple questions about values and the type of work you want to do and areas of responsibility that you kind of have to go through. A lot of them are very simple, like who will take care of fundraising? Or like, are we going 50-50? And yes, you should always be going 50-50, right? Like this kind of stuff, that's where you can flag potential causes for conflict very, very early and see whether you're an actual fit. And it only takes 15 minutes. And I always surprised, like I meet people who've been working with someone for 3 months and they haven't even discussed the equity question yet because it's too awkward. Well, it's going to be only more awkward the deeper you're into it, right?
Yeah. And that's why you're
Yeah.
there, right? You found companies together to work on the equity, like to earn the equity and to,
Correct.
yeah, that's crazy. Did you, so when you were going through those list of questions, were you trying to find someone who was very similar to you, or were you trying to find someone who maybe filled in all of the gaps of things that you either didn't want to do or maybe don't have the knowledge to do? How did you work? How did you kind of figure that out?
Yeah. I optimized a lot for two things. One is what I would call let's fucking go energy. So after having had so many calls and so many botched relationships where we would go on walks and coffees and have these hour-long Zoom workshops where like there was no result, no tangible result other than like a Google Doc with some bullet points. I really wanted to I really optimized for someone who was like hacky and knew how to launch something in a day, because this is what I expect from a technical co-founder. I expect the ability to essentially ship something that's like half broken, but like is good enough to test a hypothesis, right? That's the most important part. You're building in a pre-seed stage, you're building an iteration machine. You're building a machine that's gonna iterate on various ideas. And so this was like extremely important. And then the other factor was fun. Like, do I actually enjoy shipping with them, or does it feel like do I want to wake up and have a call with this guy or girl for the next like 3 years of my life every day at like 9 a.m. Right? And that's where like all these things like values come in, and like what do you care about, right? But yeah, I think a lot of people also over optimize for those, right? Like, for example, your political beliefs probably don't matter, but what might matter for your business relationship is whether you're motivated by just shipping things fast, or maybe your life goal is to have a Lambo before you are 30, right? These are probably very different personas, and come with very different like work styles and yeah, ethics and so on.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really interesting thing to understand. And you said that people can check this out on your Substack. You've written a
Yeah, correct. Yeah, K Konrad, double K, K Konrad, Substack, or kconrad.com. There's like I think 50 thing I call it. It's based on something else. I just shortened it and made it like into a 15-minute thing. But it's like I think 50 questions you should ask your co-founder
okay,
today or something like this. Yeah.
nice. Well, yeah, if anyone's listening, thinking about funding their project and trying to find a co-founder, go and check it out. Do you? This might be quite a difficult question. Do you think that everyone can be a founder of projects?
I think many people don't want to, and that's really, really legitimate. I used to not fully understand that. Um, but with some of the struggles of foundership, I understand, like, maybe sometimes it's really nice to wake up and exactly know what to do. And I think that's a choice, right? Like, do you want to wake up and know exactly, okay, I've been given this direction, now I'm going to solve some puzzles for like this overall direction that I'm being given? Or do I want to take responsibility of a whole team and actually set a direction, even though sometimes I will be completely clueless, right? That's also a big burden, especially when it gets ugly and maybe you're running out of runway and you have to start firing people and so on. That's like something not everyone will want in their lives. It's just more stress, right?
Yeah, for sure. They're difficult conversations to have. Those conversations. I remember the first time when I first moved into management a few years ago, having those difficult conversations. The first few that you have, nerve-wracking. To be honest, you have to really plan out like what you're going to say and how you're going to approach it and this kind of stuff. I don't think they particularly come naturally, and then after a while you get kind of used to being in uncomfortable environments and situations, right? So you can kind of get through them well and deliver things like that effectively and that kind of stuff. But yeah, they're quite tricky things to do.
Yeah, 100%. Takes
So
practice.
are there any like real key attributes or key skills that you think make a really successful founder, or maybe skills that you've picked up and learned that have really helped you now you're growing on building Peanut Protocol?
I think I can only share what I think made me a better founder. I don't know, like probably a VC would be like with a very broad portfolio would be someone who might suss out some characteristics that successful founders have in common, like maybe someone from like YC or something. But for me, what really changed in me, I think, is starting to time box things more drastically. Um, I think it's very easy to get lost, and it was, yeah, generally a mistake in some of the, like, if I were to distill the biggest mistakes I've made as a co-founder, most of them would be distillable into something like wrong time boxing, or like not having a clear idea how to falsify like a given business hypothesis. Um, yeah, I think that's one that's helped me a lot, and that wasn't super clear initially. That, well, actually, even, and when I say time box, I don't mean time box like responding to emails in 10 minutes. I mean like, let's time box this specific sales experiment. This is our go-to market, and we'll give it 2 months to try to sell to 5 people in this specific market. And if not, we're moving on to the next one. Because it's very easy to be in a situation where it kind of works, something is kind of picking up, but yeah, you are just climbing the wrong hill.
How do you know when to call it a day on something like that?
Oh, I don't. I don't. But it's really important to like have a plan initially, and then like try to stick to that, or like wake up that you've been climbing the wrong hill. I think that's the most important one, and that's what keeps your iteration machine running. Because if you're just keeping to one plan all the time, then you're not iterating, you're not testing anything new.
That's a good, yeah, I like that. That's good advice. That's a good way of looking at it. Is there any other maybe harder skills that you've learned that you think have been really, really beneficial over your time?
Good question. Not sure. It's so many small things always. I mean, fundraising isn't a hard skill, but
It's hard. It's but it's not a
hard,
hard
but
skill.
it's
Yeah.
not a hard skill. It's definitely on the soft side of skills, but it's hard. Um,
Do you have any tips on
yeah,
that?
good question. Yeah, I think people overthink it a lot. Again, it's like this LFG thing that people should do. and be more conversational. This is advice that everyone always gives, but generally, like, it's essentially a little bit almost like a sales call. So you want to also understand what is in their mind. You shouldn't be constantly in pitching mode, because if you are, but you also shouldn't like just try to kind of match whatever the VC wants. That also makes no sense. But just like genuinely try to understand their concerns, because they will have some real concerns about your company. They will probably have some kind of matrix, some kind of list. They'll be like, okay, yeah, solid team, like good credentials, shipped an MVP super fast, but their go-to-market strategy sucks, right? And they will probably not tell you. They will not tell you, because the incentive structure is set up in such a way that they just want to keep in touch, and then maybe drop in once like there are more commitments to your round. So they will like never tell you until you don't need them anymore. But you can still suss it out by just having a genuine conversation with people. You can still like learn what they think about a given go-to-market strategy, and then you can see, oh fuck, like actually that's my weak point. That's the weak point of our whole thing. Yeah, just as
It
an
sounds
example.
it sounds like one of the skills that you've really developed well is the ability to question or ask questions effectively and really understand like how to evaluate certain situations and things. Because you mentioned about like questions to ask your co-founder and going through that like systematic approach around how to really kind of nail down what you want, and then about questioning whether or not that particular hypothesis is going to work and evaluating on whether that is the right thing, and then obviously asking the right questions to people in that fundraising or in those fundraising conversations and things. So that ability to question sounds quite key. If you're a founder, you've got to be able to ask the right things at the right times, by the sound of it.
Yeah, yeah, I guess so. I guess that's a really good summary, and the ability to listen in that. Like there are, and it can be tiring sometimes, especially at networking events where you meet a specific type of founder who's a talker, and they just bombard you with their pitch. It's super annoying, but also they never learn anything, right? Like some of the best ideas and use cases come from just, well, having a conversation, listening a bit. And I think we all do too little of it. Me personally, I for sure do too little of that, like having way too few calls to actually listen and do that. But yeah, still trying.
Yeah, for sure. It's that whole like active listening skill, isn't it? So really trying to pay attention to what the person says and kind of deep diving into certain things they talk about, or maybe certain things that you're curious about, and like really trying to understand their point of view and the things that they're talking about. I think it's really, really key skill.
It's a key skill. Fully agreed. And it's a key skill in every area, in every area that a founder needs to be at least decent at, right? So hiring, same thing. It's so surprising to me. I haven't done much hiring, but it's so surprising to me how honest people are in their answers. As in, I thought, well, people would try to game the system and try to give you what you want from them. But usually, if you ask them directly, like, for instance, why are you leaving your current job, or why are you looking for something new, they'll give you a pretty good answer that will actually be super relevant to your search. Of course, provided you didn't give away exactly. You weren't like, oh, we look for people who want to be in a small team of 3 to 5. What kind of team size do you like? That doesn't work. Right? But hey, I'm leaving my company now because I feel like I'm just a cog in a giant machine and I don't feel I'm making enough impact. Perfect, right? Or maybe, oh, I'm leaving this company because the work times are super unbalanced and I'm expected to respond on Slack at midnight. That's another one that you could suss out. Like, okay, what do you need them for? Like, maybe if it's a customer support person, then probably they better be responding also at midnight if that's their job, right? But maybe if it's an engineer and they work best if they have their own async time, maybe that's that's the best thing for them, right? And then like, does it fit the team? What were your experiences with this? I mean, I'm sure you do a lot of these. You have a lot of these conversations too.
Yeah, for sure. I think it depends how well the other person is prepared for their interview, to be honest. I think a lot of the time, if you ask people completely direct questions, then it can throw some people off sometimes, which then makes them give you a really honest answer because they're maybe not expecting such a direct question on certain things. Or um, yeah, again, I think it depends. I mean, I've seen it go the other way as well, where someone talks a really good game and then they get into the job and it's completely different, and they were, you know, really well prepared for the interview, and a completely different person turns up on the first day. So it can vary quite a lot. But I always find that if you have that skill to be able to deep dive into topics, or really actively listen to the other person, so really try and hear what they're saying as opposed to maybe talking over what they're going to say afterwards, or even just leaving pauses at the end of them finishing sentences, and they may then add more things, or just learning like more things like that when you're going through that whole questioning kind of phases can really help you open someone up when it comes to really understanding their experience, or what they bring to the table, or what they're looking for, or what their true motivations are.
Yeah,
So yeah, I've seen it go both ways, but it's a good skill to have, even in everyday life. It's not just from a recruitment standpoint or a work standpoint. I think just when you even start speaking to some of like friends or family, and you really want to get into conversations, like really actively listening to what they say and just being curious around certain things that they say, or the way they say things, and this kind of stuff can really just, yeah, you just start to understand people on a much deeper level, really.
yeah, that's true. Active listening really helps you to connect. I also really like what you said about the pausing. Like, I think one of the surprising things to me was how silence can be your friend in sales. Generally, letting the other person, like giving them a lot of room to talk you through their problem, will be probably the most efficient way of, understanding whether you can help them or not, and and then help them. And it's a bit counterintuitive because we have this pop culture image of a salesman who's, loud and convincing and dominant, but it's actually exactly the opposite, probably.
Yeah, I read a new really interesting book called The Challenger Sale. I'm not sure if you've heard of that book before. So it talks through the different types of salesperson, and who is actually the most successful. And it talks about being someone who is a lone wolf, about how they don't work well in a team, they're left to their own devices, they'll do it how they want, they're quite, they just sell, go. They're not a team player necessarily. And then you have the relationship builder, who is there to foster those relationships long term. They take quite a softly approach. And then you have the challenger, who goes in from more of an insight perspective, and they'll listen to their customer and then try and consult them and maybe challenge them on things that they believe or things that they say, and try and suggest better ways and that kind of thing. And a lot of people think that the relationship builder is the best salesman, but it's actually the challenger, the person who listens and really consults and challenges and teaches people about what they're trying to sell or trying to do. That's quite an
Yeah,
interesting book. If you like sales and yeah, you like to understand the psychology behind sales and things, it's quite an interesting book to read.
I'll have a look at it. I mean, intuitively, it seems to make sense because if you build a relationship, okay, cool, you've made a friend, but maybe for an unimportant business decision, they will refer to you just because it's the easiest, because you're their friend already and they can trust you. But for the most important ones, i.e., the ones with the highest value, they'll probably will be optimizing for the best solution. And if you haven't listened actively and understand their problem really deeply, you simply won't be able to offer the best solution.
100%.
So it makes
100%.
makes a lot of sense logically. Yeah.
Have you had to do much sales when it comes to Peanut Protocol? Have you had to get out there and build partnerships and BD and sales and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, at Peanut, we until recently we were extremely focused on an SDK that other projects could integrate and use our feature set. So what Peanut lets you do is the protocol lets you deposit any kind of token and gives you a link or QR code that you can then send to your friends. So essentially, it lets you text people with value, like with tokens, with an NFT, with stable coins, anything you like. And that's especially useful in a wallet. So imagine you have a wallet, and then you can input the recipient's ENS name or their wallet address. But maybe if you don't know that, you can just input their phone number or their email, or just generate a link and send it on WhatsApp. And that's exactly where we thought the product would live really, really well, was in wallet. So that was our initial go-to-market. And it's only now that we are also building a more consumer-facing app, because we saw some traction on actual end consumers using us directly. And generally, wallet integration cycles are very long. So you're like, well, why wait? We can have users directly on the app.
That's a good idea. Imagine I just imagine how much crypto has been lost when people inputting the wrong wallet addresses in. Whereas if they could generate a link and send it to someone without needing their wallet address, that could have saved
Yeah,
a lot of people a lot of headache, probably.
yeah, absolutely. So not just losing, I mean, going to the wrong address, I mean, there's this famous case of 20 million being sent by the Optimism Foundation, I think. Oh, sorry, was it Nethermind? I don't remember. This was like over a year ago now, but they got the address wrong because it was a multi-sig and they were different across chains. And I mean, there's lots of smaller anecdotal cases like this. But also, I think a really, really important part is in this, when I try to send you $10, I just want to send you $10. And currently in crypto, it's this whole long conversation of like, what's your address? That's one part of it. And then which token, right? Imagine there's three popular stable coins, USDC, USDT, XDAI, and there's more coming. And then there is like 10 popular L2s, right? Plus mainnet. So already we have a fragmentation of like 3 by 10, where you would have to coordinate that, and you have to say like, oh yeah, USDC on Polygon is okay. Oh yeah, what's USDT work or whatever. And then you have to probably bridge it yourself or like swap it yourself. Super annoying. With Peanut, you just send a link and the recipient can claim on whichever chain they like. And very soon, now at ECC, we will be launching off-ramping. So you will be able to just claim directly to your bank account without even having to care about the whole process. So now this unlocks a completely new kind of case of value transfer where I, as a crypto native with crypto holdings, can send money to literally like my mom, and she'll be handheld, like she'll get the link and then she'll be handheld through the off-ramping process directly to her bank account. And all she needs to put in is her IBAN and then pass a very quick KYC check, like literally 2 minutes, and she only has to do that once, and then we're good, right? And now from now on, I can always send crypto, and she can always off-ramp it directly to the bank without even having to touch the crypto at any one point, right? She doesn't even, like, it just says $100, and it says $100, and then in a small font it says USDC, in USDC on Optimism, let's say. And then where do you want to claim it? IBAN, wallet address, ENS, like whatever you like.
That's cool. Is that going to work with every country? Are you targeting specific regions to start with?
Yeah, we're starting with Europe and US, just two really large markets. And we really want to expand very quickly into emergent markets as well, because there's a really, really strong need. So for instance, I think in Europe and US, I probably don't need it as much as someone from, let's say, Argentina right now, because we have Revolut. Like Revolut works well. It's not crypto, but it works well. It's fast, it's seamless. Most people have it. In the US, you'll have Cash App or Venmo. Those things work really, really nicely. But in a lot of countries, especially with unstable currencies, people have been hedging, well, they have been escaping their own currency to stablecoins, and now they are holders of stablecoins, but they can't do much with it. And I think now is the time where that can get unlocked, where finally stablecoins are not just a store of value, but they can be used directly for transfers.
Yeah, that's cool. I'll be keeping a close eye on Peanut Protocol. It sounds good.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, it can sounds like it can unlock all sorts of things for all sorts of countries, to be honest, and probably help a lot with the whole. Obviously, there's a lot of people out there who send money home, right? They might work in a particular country and then send that money home and do that whole like remittance thing. I guess
Yeah.
that can really help and solve a lot of that problem rather than people paying huge fees on remittance through the traditional remittance companies and that kind of stuff. Is that I'm guessing that's a market you guys might be looking at or are considering.
Yeah, we're looking at this. Yeah, we're looking at this market. Ideally, we would partner up with like local companies that already have some kind of payments systems. So that's the ideal thing. So if anyone's listening from like a more local payments app, hit me up. We can also bootstrap these consumer bases. One interesting story I had last week, I was at my hairdresser's, and he's from Peru. Peru has a very stable currency, generally quite stable economy. Like everything's going well. They haven't had any like big 2-digit inflation or anything like that. But and this guy, he does 3 to 4 remittances per month, and he gets ripped off 10% on the remittance, 10% for the transfer. Yeah, and it's to me that's crazy.
It's a lot of money.
And he knows, of course, about PayPal and Venmo and all these other things, but his use case is that he wants it to be cash in the local currency. So I think a lot of the stuff that's going to happen in crypto for these emergent economies is going to go through kiosks, who will still have to charge something because it's an expensive service to have someone there. But it will have to go through these kiosks that you have, for instance, in Turkey or in Georgia, where there's literally a currency exchange shop that will also let you sell or buy, usually USDT, and from the EVM chains, usually on Polygon or mainnet. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a remittance project that got me into Web3 originally.
Really?
Actually, yeah, back in I want to say January 2020, I think, is when I first bought my first ever crypto. That was a project called Telcoin. Not sure if you've heard of it before.
Telcoin.
No,
Not yet.
They're a remittance project, but they not just that. They also, I think, they're launching their own chain shortly, and they've got their own exchange and that kind of thing. Their whole thing is basically bringing banking to the unbanked. So in developing countries, they have connections with all of the telco providers in those countries, so that you can actually text each other crypto. So you can just use the products and just send an SMS to your friend, and then it has a link, and they can then get the crypto themselves. Where people find it really difficult to get bank accounts and this kind of thing. That was the first ever project I bought into, actually, way back when.
Oh, that sounds very similar to Peanut. I'll actually reach out to them because maybe there is something we can do with EVM chains for them as well. So I'm assuming they have their own L1, right?
They will do shortly. Actually, I don't think it's launched yet, but in the next two, three months.
Got it.
So yeah, check them out.
Well, yeah.
Did your mindset have to change quite a lot, or how did your mindset change from moving from academia into running a tech startup? Like, how did that transition go? Because they're two quite different things, right?
Yeah, it's a bit faster. The whole crypto thing. Yeah. It's a very different work style where you don't. especially as a founder, I think you just don't have the time to dig super deeply. Which, well, you do in academia. That's literally what you're supposed to do, right? You're supposed to sit there in the library and then digest hundreds of papers, and then produce maybe one paper. Um, I think in Web3, like anywhere in tech, when you're a founder, you again time box your decisions to like relatively short decisions. They should be informed, but you don't sit around researching other companies or stuff like that. You have a brief look at the landscape, um, of of your competitor landscape, and then you pick something and then you go. Yeah.
Okay. Nice. Yeah, because I think that's a really interesting thing to understand, because I find it quite fascinating how people can switch from different careers into them becoming a founder, or even coming from Web 2 into Web 3, to be honest, and the difference between how people have, or the different mindsets, which I guess that people have had. And obviously everyone handles that differently or approaches it slightly differently. Did you just go, you know what, I'm just going to go into the deep end and get chucked in and worry about it afterwards? Or did you kind of prep yourself for it? Or did you do much research around it? Or just go for it and see what happens?
So when we decided to co-found with Hugo, and this goes back a little bit to like co-founder search advice as well, we started team first, problem second, and that's generally a recommendation I would, because the problem is if one co-founder comes in with a very strong idea, there's only a small subset of founders who will still feel very strong ownership about that. So it's best if you come up with some kind of problem solution set together. And with Hugo, we've been iterating for something like 5 months, I think, on different projects. So what we did, our approach was very Web3 unique, because only in Web3 do you have hackathons that are that juicy. So we just went for every possible hackathon we could find, and then just randomly hacked stuff. And usually these weren't even useful things. Most of them were just like fun things. But this really exposed us to the tech stack, to the technologies, and to the narratives that were there. And it was also then when we got exposed to how annoying it is to actually make transfers. um, and it was surprisingly annoying, and it seemed EVM uniquely annoying, because well, Bitcoin was meant initially as this like peer-to-peer cash system, digital cash system, right? So it was cash, like it had transfers, like that was the base idea. It wasn't like store of value. It wasn't like peer-to-peer network for store of value. No, it was peer-to-peer network for cash, for like replacing coins. We even call them coins, right? Um, and it was kind of shocking to see how annoying it was to make a simple transaction, especially on EVM, where you have this whole explosion of L2s and a lot of adoption of very different stablecoins. You don't have that. I mean, on Bitcoin, you don't have that at all, right? Maybe you have the difference between Lightning and non-Lightning transactions. And then on Solana, it's just one chain and maybe two stablecoins. So yeah, and then Tron and so on, it's also usually just one stablecoin. So much simpler there. Still annoying and still too hard to use, I think, for a newbie, but less annoying than on EVM chains. And to answer the question, yeah, this was so. This was how we started to look at different problems, and then just kind of fell in love with one of these problems.
Nice, nice. And what's it really like then building a Web3 project from the ground up? Because on the outside looking in, obviously it can come across as really good fun and pretty innovative, and you're at the forefront of technology, quite glamorous in some ways as well to be, a founder in Web3, which I'm sure it is all of those things. But then actually day to day, the things that people don't see, what's it really like, boots on the ground, day to day building of a project?
Yeah, I think we should have more boots on the ground, to be honest. I think like going to ECC is not truly boots on the ground. You end up talking to the same people about the same problems, who people who shill the same bags, and boots on the ground, because we have all this talk about like emergent economies, banking the unbanked, all of this. Um, it's all good, but like we should be there. We should probably be, amongst other things, right? Like it's not the only, cash isn't the only use case for crypto, but it's definitely a very 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 strong one that is very underexplored, or at least hasn't reached mass adoption yet. Mm. And yeah, for that you should probably have true boots on the ground. As to what it's like, I think it's very fast moving, and a lot of the playbooks are not well established, and the meta changes all the time, right? So when you run a B2B SaaS, you can go to a VC and ask them, hey, for this kind of industry, what's a good customer lifetime value to customer acquisition cost ratio? And they'll tell you something. They'll give you a number, and then they'll give you 5 case studies on like similar things and how they've done it. In crypto, like the whole points meta came out, what, maybe half a year ago, a year ago? The whole airdrop, community airdrop thing with like L2s was less than 2 years ago, right? Like that's like the meta. Now it's points, and now points are kind of slowly fading out. Or I don't know what's happening to points, but like, and this is an extremely fast cycle where there's just innovation top of innovation top of innovation, which you wouldn't have in Web 2. And then another thing that I find really really fascinating is this really really strange mix between seeming transparency and then incredible obscurity, actually. Because in Web3, it seems, on paper, it seems that everything is so transparent because everything lives on the blockchain, and you can just fire up a Dune dashboard and then see what's happening to a given protocol. But because of all the VC money and the huge incentive programs that most of these protocols bring in, you end up with a huge mix of mercenary users who are airdrop farmers who will boost metrics, who are like rent a user almost, and genuine users, which the two you can't distinguish at all, right? Until after the airdrop, let's say. And that's a really really weird combo where it's really really hard to suss out. Like you can't just do a normal A/B test like you would on a large e-commerce store, or maybe like that's what people do, but you can't do it as an outsider of a company. You can do that internally. So it feels like everything, like on paper, everything should be so open and transparent, but actually it's really 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 hard to make sense of any of the metrics that we see, and most of them are probably being used to boost some kind of valuation. So that's a really unique thing that you don't have. Well, you have that in Web 2 as well, but not to that extent.
Okay. Is there anything else that you'd love people to be aware of? Because that sounds like quite an important thing that people need to be aware of before coming into the space, right? That you don't have all of the data there from 200 300 companies that have tried this particular approach in that particular market before, and this is how it works well for this type of consumer and things. So you don't have necessarily that data. You might be trying things out for the first time, or one of 10 15 startups that are approaching a particular idea, or maybe less than that in some places. Is there anything else that you think people need to be really aware of before joining the space, before coming into the industry?
Yeah, good question. This was the thing that I found most surprising. And then another one that I still find surprising is how much funding there is for infra, where a lot of the infra, and especially middleware, seems to be very replaceable. Like it seems to commoditize very, very, very quickly. And yeah, whereas the classical VC mode, right? usually very weak network effects, like usually very like un-VC. Like on paper, it wouldn't seem like VCs would want to invest, but they do it because of some tokenomics usually. And that's also a whole thing to navigate that is very surprising, I think, to someone who would come from a Web2 startup background, especially with like a YC mindset and stuff like that. Yeah.
That's good to know. It's good to get the insight. Yeah, from a founder building in Web3. I haven't heard that one on the podcast yet, so you're the first one to make people aware
Really?
of that situation.
What are some other things, or some other surprising things you've heard?
So some of the common things that come up are people being aware of the community feel of the industry, about how everything is almost being built out in the open. Sometimes the pressures that can come from building with a community that they might not be used to when joining from Web2. Again, the speed and the pace that everything changes, and being able to stay up to date with everything in Web3, new things popping up every single day. It feels like the trends change in the industry, then pivots and points in a different direction, and then one day everyone just decides, nope, we're not doing that anymore. We're going to look at something else. And I think you have to be able to deal with that change quite rapidly. You have to deal with that rapid change well. What else is quite a common thing? I think those are the main ones, really.
Yeah, they make sense. I mean, yeah, fully agreed. Especially if like a lot of crypto native marketing is all about building some kind of excitement for like some future rewards. It's a very tough place to navigate because you can't overpromise, but you want people to get as hyped up as possible. So it's really, really tough. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard. I think it's another one as well that people need to be aware of, is that there are scam projects in this space.
That's you don't have that.
Yeah. No, you don't get it. You don't get completely rogue projects that will just kind of pull the rug and disappear, and all sorts of different scams and connect your wallet to the wrong contract, and your wallet's drained, like all this kind of stuff. You just don't have that type of thing really in I suppose you have like phishing scams and that kind of stuff, right? But not to the same extent maybe as Web3.
And they're not projects. Like you have phishing scams, but it's a scam, not a scam project.
It's a guy in his bedroom.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Again, that's a tricky thing to get your head around, and almost being able to do your own research on particular projects, especially if you're a person looking for a job in Web3, like really trying to do your background on the founders and the actual project itself and who the backers are and the funding, and really trying to understand that side of it is probably research that a lot of people have never had to do before. If they're coming into Web3 for the first time, it would be completely unnatural, really.
Yeah, same for a hiring perspective. I mean, we have an open applications form on our website, and I would say that 20% of the applications are very, very obvious attempts at scams. Usually the scam works by trying to infect you with some malware that will scan for seed phrases on your device. So whether that is a repo that is being shared by a prospective, like someone who pretends to want to work for you and then shares like, oh, just trust me, run this code locally and like it will show you this amazing project, right? Or like some like weird PDFs and stuff like that. I would say like really 20%. They are quite obvious, but I can imagine people who are not aware of the extent of phishing and malware fall for some of these.
Yeah, it's tough. And as a recruiter as well, I mean, you get sent CVs all the time, right? And you just assume naturally that you're going to open a CV when you click on a PDF or a Word doc or something like that. So that's quite a tricky thing to navigate as well, really. But it's hard. It's hard to know when to open them and when not to, honestly. Yeah.
General advice, I think it's quite hard to infect computers from within a Chrome tab. It's definitely possible with a PDF, but there's way fewer vulnerabilities than in something like Adobe Acrobat Reader, whatever. So yeah, but yeah, I mean, oh, and with recruiting as well, just like it's a completely different space because in Web 2 you have LinkedIn, and LinkedIn is like your proof of work. It's like your people like you people lie on LinkedIn, but they don't lie blatantly. Like no one's gonna lie about, or like very few people will completely lie and make up a story about having been to Harvard, but not having been. People will lie about the grade they got, maybe, but the big picture will kind of line up. At least the names of the companies and so on. I think it's relatively rare that people just completely invent a bio. And in crypto, because people are averse, like people, I don't know, don't like LinkedIn because they try to be cool or something. I don't know. They will hide stuff. People try to moonlight all the time, like one engineer working at 3 companies at the same time, all the time. And yeah, generally big red flag. I think if people don't have a relatively up to date LinkedIn profile, but are not like a C-level founder, then it's or like a founder, someone C-level or a founder, then like there's probably something fishy going on. At least that's been my finding. What was yours? I mean, you look at way more profiles than I do.
Again, I've had it both ways. So I've had there's a real trend in Web3 for, even to be honest, I think it's even coming into Web2 now as well, to be honest. But people just creating like fake LinkedIn profiles, and then they'll message you and they almost read. I'm nervous to give away the secrets in case they change their tactics if they listen to this. But yeah, it'll always be like guys from similar sorts of area of the world, and they'll always read the same script, and they always put like a background on their screen so you can't really see where they're from, and they might say they're living in one particular country. You'll ask them just for a single word of that language, and they say they've been there for like a year and they just don't know anything. There's a lot of red flags, but they all just read like the same script, and when you jump on a call you can instantly tell within the first 10 seconds that this person is a fake profile just trying to get a job, and then they'll even send someone else through to do the technical assessments if they're an engineer, for example. And then someone else will turn up on the first day of work, and then they'll just collect a salary for a couple of months, and they might do that to 100. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know how many people companies they can do that with, but yeah, that happens all the time. They have a full LinkedIn profile, even say they work at particular businesses and this kind of stuff.
Wow.
So I'd say from a hiring perspective in Web3, like now I always ask people to actually name the specific projects where they've delivered work or who they've worked with. Because the space is so small that through maybe like 1 degree of connection, you know someone's connected to someone, and you can just say, look, can you help me out here? I don't know if this person is quite real. Don't know if they've done what they said they've done. Like, can you just help me out? And most people will say yes, because they've either known someone who that's happened to, or they might be hiring themselves and they've had a bunch of the same things happen and this kind of stuff. So having up to date profiles and references and people that you can speak to, I think is key. Really.
Yeah. Fully agree.
It's tough. But then on the other side,
it's a waste of time too, like to cross-check everything, right?
Yeah, it is. That's why you need to work with good recruiters, probably, so they can take all that off your plate. But I've even had it the other way, and I know some great people who don't have LinkedIn profiles at all. You wouldn't find them anywhere, and I've been introduced to them through Telegram or something like this, and actually, to be honest, they're people I've been introduced to through people I trust, actually, and again, it's that whole kind of like trusted referral network and that kind of thing, which is massively key in Web3, from a hiring perspective anyway, where they've got nothing anywhere. You won't even tell. They might have a Twitter or an X profile that will say something completely random as the handle, and you'll have no idea that this person is doing what they say they do and this kind of thing. And they've turned out to be some of the best engineers that we've come across and stuff, I guess. So it can happen both ways, but I think the referral side of it, I wouldn't trust it if they weren't referred to me from someone that I trust. Then you just wouldn't speak to them, right? It makes sense. Do it. and I don't think anyone's quite cracked the proof of work, proof of CV, proof of person, digital identity yet.
No.
So that you can actually know if that person is, really done what they've said they've done, and this kind of stuff. So
Yeah, I don't think you can easily do it. Yeah,
no,
like it's not. You would need all of the like you would need all of the jobs essentially to somehow attest to you having done something, and you would have to convince a lot of people to switch to like some non-LinkedIn technology.
yeah, LinkedIn have got a bit of a monopoly as well
Yeah,
on that
exactly.
whole market.
Yeah.
But Conrad, to finish up, I mean, you shared some brilliant insight today into what it's really like to be a founder, and really enjoyed listening to your journey and how you moved into the Web3 space and came up with the idea of Peanut. Knowing what you know now about business technology, leadership, hiring teams, whatever it might be, if you could go back to the start of your career, that academic when you first started, any advice that you could share for your younger self?
Yeah, really good question. Yeah, I think kind of related to what I said earlier about time boxing whole hypotheses to test, like not getting attached to, and it's very, very hard. I think that's one of the biggest struggles is to fall in love with and it's a cliche, but fall in love with the problem, not the solution. Um, and it's a huge cliche, but it's really, really hard because once you've started building something, you get acquainted with it, you start feeling comfortable with it, you maybe feel a sense of pride. It's very, very hard to then get away from it and not treat it as just like one of the many hypotheses that I tried to test. Whereas your task is not to like, at least at pre-seed and seed stage, your task isn't to bring something magical into the world that like you envisioned, but just to iterate through as many hypotheses as you can. And only at Series A stage, your growth stage, is like to make that happen on a big scale in the world, in the real world. And I think that's something that's like super overlooked because a lot of like when you listen to all the fundraising advice and all the startup advice, like there's so much emphasis on vision, but it's not about like your vision and your personal thing in that world. It's like really just going through as many tests as you can run as quickly as possible, being as scrappy as you can with it. I think this is something that I would have, and that you have many shots, in fact, that you have a certain runway if you have funding, and you can divide that up into like however many hypotheses you want to test in whatever resolution and depth you want to test them in. I think it's very easy to get fixated on like one thing, and that's a struggle that I think is really, really hard and still is for me despite having this learning.
I like that advice. Fall in love with the problem, not the solution.
Yeah.
I like that. You need that. You need that on your wall in the background there. That needs to be a quote behind you.
Yeah, that would be nice. Yeah. We'll add it there. So.
Yeah, you should. Well, Konrad, thank you very much for taking the time to have a conversation today. I've learned a lot from you about your journey and your approach, and I'm going to listen back to this episode and take a bunch of notes myself. And you've already got me thinking how long I've been spending, or maybe I've been spending too long on certain things that I do, and maybe I need to, cut that short and trial something else. But if anyone's listening and they've got any extra questions, they want to find out more information on Peanut Protocol, or even maybe pick your brains about being a founder, or maybe they are thinking, actually, you know what, it sounds like a really interesting technology, and they will want to explore maybe integrating it with their project, look at partnerships and stuff. Where's the best place to reach out? Is it LinkedIn? Is it Twitter?
Yeah, Twitter or LinkedIn both work. So it's kconrad.com for any of the personal stuff. and it has a bunch of links to my Twitter, Farcasters, and whatever, all these things, and LinkedIn. And then Peanut Protocol for anything like payments or integrations, stable coins, anything, emergent markets. Also, always happy to just chat and learn from you. Like if there's anything you think might be interesting or insightful about the space, like super happy to just jam on it.
Sounds great. Sounds great. Well, yeah, Conrad, thanks again. Been brilliant to speak.
Thank you, Jack.
And I'll catch you soon. Take care.
See you.
Bye.